First of all, let me thank Youth Forum for Kashmir, and it's good to see all the young people, and I wish and hope that I would have seen even more women in this forum as well. But it's great to see all the young people, who are going to also work on this very, very important issue. As you know, the rape in conflict, in war, in conflict zone is a global issue. It's not specifically that if a war or conflict happens in a Christian world or in a Muslim world, so if it happens in Christian world, it doesn't happen, or if it happens in Muslim world, war is not, rape is not used as a war, sort of as a war strategy, because if you remember, it's cut across all those, national boundaries, what we have seen, whether the conflict was in Africa or Asia or Middle East or South Asia, we have seen that the rape, sexualized violence and rape is used as a war strategy, So we will discuss that so I think that first of all, what is important to understand, why is that, Obviously, the sexualized violence is not only used against women, although the women are in majority, it also used against children and also against men. But often what happens, I feel that as for the male rape is concerned, there's complete silence, and we'll talk about it. Why is that? Because it is again a part of that masculine identity, where men do not still even find to come forward to also report, rape, because they feel that their own notion of masculinity gets very much destabilized, and they feel they're not men anymore. It's more kind of a shame associated. If men come forward and say, we have been also raped, but we know for sure, even in in former Yugoslavia, if you remember the war in, civil war, 1995 in Bosnia, where there's a lot of women, although I think the figure varies from 20,000 to 60,000 women who were raped, and mostly it was Muslim women. There were a lot of Muslim men were also raped, but they are not coming forward to talk about that. So we know that it takes place, So first of all, I think it's important to understand why women's bodies become battlegrounds, in conflict situation. And I think we cannot talk about, even if we want to develop strategies that could bring a change in terms of not attacking, women and, and sexually violating them, we have to understand, but why does it take place, And I think then that brings us to peace times. In peace times, I think there's a whole mindset, the patriarchal mindset, where women are essentially seen as a sexual object, Women are also seen as a property of men. This whole concept of women as property, and they belong to men. Also, women are seen as the reproducer of communities, because essentially this whole notion of sexual division of labor, whereby we feel the women primary roles are as mothers, as wives, to bring up, to give birth to children and, and to brought up children. So women are essentially seen as the reproducer of their own communities, So whole notion of, and then if you look at in peacetime also, the concept of honor and izzat of a man is basically resides in women's bodies, If anything, I mean, if the woman has done, basically, if the woman has done something, if the men feel that their honor is being violated, So I think that is the patriarchal mindset, where women are not seen as independent human beings, but seen, in relation to men, They exist in relation to men, They are their property, they're their honor, they're their izzat. So that mindset, when there is a conflict, so that mind extended into battlegrounds, battlefield as well, So at the, when women are raped in war, it's not about a sexual act, It's about destroying the community, destroying the men, to bring the extreme humiliation to men is that we are going to rape, It's ethnic, cleansing, it's genocide, ethnic cleansing, because I was recently in Bosnia, and I was and I was reading some of the testimonies of women whereby they said when the Serbian soldiers were raping Muslim women, they were saying, we'll change your, next generations. And actually the problem in Bosnia is like the children who are born out of that rape, I think still they are trying to grapple with the idea that the nationality of children is not determined, whether those children who are born out of rape, whether they are being considered as Serbs, because in Bosnia there is still this complete ethnic divide because you have Serbs and Bosniak Muslims and Croats living in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so at the time of war and conflict, the rape is less than a sexual act, but more of a power, assertion of power, domination, and destroying the enemy, You think by doing, and ethnic cleansing, You think, okay, by doing that, we are going to change their generations, So I think that is the mindset, and you cannot deal with that mindset, when there is a conflict. We have to work against that mindset in peace times as well, where women are not seen, as belonging to someone else. In order to, humanize or humiliate or, men, then you start destroying women, so that's why women's bodies become the battleground. So I think that understanding is very important, That's not going to happen because we all know the international law is there, I mean, now if you look at the humanitarian law, international law, if you look at the human rights law, it's all make rape as a war crime, It's not allowed, it's forbidden, but it's happening. It doesn't, when it comes to it, it's, any conflict, it is still happening, whether it's in Kashmir has already happened, is happening there. Bangladesh, for example, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of evidence and testimonies that our soldiers in Bangladesh also raped women in large numbers. And we are not even willing to accept that. I mean, let alone about, Ahmed Qureshi talked about, a conviction and all that. But what do we do when the state is not even willing to recognize that that kind of violation has taken place by the Pakistan army, and then to bring them to task, and what we see, so that is one thing, what I just want to bring to your notice, because I feel that even international law, I think the non-implementation, because if you see, even till 1977, when there was a protocol, to this Geneva Convention on, signed, I think even the definition, if you look at the definition back in 99 protocol, it says, I just read that for you because that same mindset, because how they were defining rape, they were saying that it was, it is merely a crime against honor, dignity, or property rights of a male relatives, So till 1977, the protocol which was introduced to the Geneva Convention is defining, the women rape as a violation of men, because their honor has been, violated, and women as their property has been, violated. So it is all about men, not about women at all, So what I'm saying, okay, despite whatever the lacunas, even in today's, I think there is enough in terms of international humanitarian law, international, human rights law, that if we implement that, properly all around the world, then I think we can, definitely bring those perpetrators to justice. But what we think that we all know, the international justice is very selective. I mean, there is no international tribunal on Kunan Poshpura rape. I mean, there has been, a tribunal in Yugoslavia, like in Bosnia and what's happened, and also in Rwanda. but the UN has not established any tribunal on Kunan Poshpara, because there is a lot of testimonies. The women themselves who are coming out and saying this has happened to us, you know. Although I feel that rape in conflict remains as a very invisible crime. And the reason being what Amit Qureshi Sahab has mentioned, it still is very much associated with fear, with guilt, with shame, taboo, you know, and women are often not even accepted. And as I said, I have met quite few women in Bosnia, whereby they said that, you know, because now there is a law where they said that if the women come forward, now they don't have to bring evidence to prove that they have been violated. But if they say they have violated, then they will get a little bit of, you know, they get social security, they get some counseling, they have a free health services and all that. But then women say that their families, you know, they get a lot of, you know, problem with their families, from their communities. So it's not easy for women to come forward and say, you know, because this whole crime is still associated with shame, guilt, and also fear, you know. A lot of time, men who probably in peacetime are still there, you know, living in the same community, can also endanger your lives, you know. So one of the things is it is very clear that it's still, whatever the reported cases of, you know, of rape during conflict and in war zones, they are tip of the icebergs. There's a lot more sexual violence takes place. I think we should assume that it happens, you know. And I think in terms of how do we deal, how do we deal with that? I think first of all, obviously, there is a responsibility at two levels. I think first of all, there is international, because a lot of conflicts in today's world, I think there's an international community has a role to play, you know. And I feel in terms of implementation of those laws, this is the responsibility of the international human rights courts and all that, that they should make sure they can also independently have this information. Like, don't you think that the UN has information on Kunan Poshpura? I mean, can't their independent people can go and meet those women? You know, there is recently a book, I think, for the IDC, Kunan Poshpura. I mean, there's a whole book where there are researchers who have gone and they had collected those testimonies. And I think what is the problem for the UN, you know, to set up a mission to go and meet those women and then establish a tribunal. So I think there are a role, first of all, there is a role, I think, at the for the international community. We can't let them off the hook, you know. We can't allow them that they can be very, you know, there is a selective justice, you know. They are not looking, what is happening in Syria, for example. So one is that. The other, then we come to the domestic situations, you know. Like, for example, if you look at the Kashmir issue of, like, Bangladesh in Pakistan, if you talk about Pakistani state, and Swat. What had happened in Swat? I think we still have those Taliban, you know, walking around who have actually kidnapped girls and forcefully married, you know, consummated marriage, you know, with the girls less than 12-year-olds, you know. And they were going around and they're finding, you know, young girls, and they were forcefully marrying them, you know. But can we ask our state that let's go after those perpetrators, those criminals, because it was a crime that is being committed, you know. So in a way, approaching, you know, what Qureshi Sahab was saying, that without any shaming and blaming, which I feel that when it comes to conviction, you know, when it comes to go after the criminals, you know, then obviously you have to make the state, you know, you have to hold your own state accountable that they should go after those criminals. Huh? And I can tell you in Swat, we have a lot of testimonies, and also there are people who have violated them and living in the same village, in the same communities. But if the state is not willing to accept, you know, in the first place, then how do we make sure that those criminals are being convicted? And it's very important that, you know, like the state international court and the domestic state, you know, the court should be willing to accept this rape as a war crime and then willing to do the conviction. And then I think the issue of, for example, the other thing is that, of course, our responsibility towards the victims, towards the survivors, because it has a huge, when the rape has a huge physical and psychological and emotional impact, which is very, very damaging, So providing them kind of a counseling so the people could, these people could, women especially could rebuild their lives, with that, they should have that strength, that we have to de-link this whole notion of, if somebody raped them, that it's not like the kind of language we use even normally when there is a rape, izzat lut gayi. I mean, what is this language? How could anybody can steal somebody's izzat? And the other thing is that it's not about if somebody is the criminal whose izzat should be at stake, not the victim. So, and also it's not like as women's, the whole worth lies in her sexuality, in her, so if you look at we continue to use that language in our media, in our, whereby you basically depossess again the victim by saying, like wo beizzat ho gayi, uski izzat lut gayi, and things like that, And I think this is, we need to also be aware of that kind of lexicon, that kind of a language, which we use, So I think in terms of, I would say, giving support to the victim, survivors of rape and violence, and I think, of course, they need all kind of support, but I think it is also very important, again, I will say, if the women are not have that kind of a gender consciousness, if women themselves think in a very patriarchal manner, which a lot of women do, Patriarchy is not about male and female bodies, Patriarchy is about a mindset, So some women can also be very patriarchal in their thinking. They maybe also think like men think of women, like as if, this is my honor, and I should not be, if I will report that I was violated, then I will become a less valued human being, So then that's why a lot of women think that way, and I think as when gender consciousness and awareness is concerned, it's not only about awareing men, it's also about awareing, gender awareness of women as well. So they themselves should stand up and be very proud and say, because this is celebrating their agency. Those women who come forward and say, I have been violated, that means they are a stronger human being. They have an agency. They know their rights. They know it is a crime which committed against them, and they have a right to get or seek justice. And I think that's why it is equally important that gender awareness should be also targeted men, women, and lastly, of course, those, in conflict situation, people who, who are actually like the military and the police and those forces. I think definitely if you look at the curriculum of defense college, and what kind of training is given to military. I don't think these things are even as a part of the curriculum, at the content, as a part of. So there is no sort of gender awareness is being considered as an essential component of how the war should be actually fought. Although people like us do not believe in any kind of, we feel there should be we should find ways how to resolve conflict through peaceful means. But I think what is very clearly obvious that as for military colleges and military training and training in the police is concerned, I don't think this topic has become part of their training, their consciousness raising, and unless we do that, I don't think we can deal with this issue. With that, I'll thank you very much for paying some attention to what I said. Thanks a lot.